my little goslings. This is Mrs. Thorson again. I'm going to be teaching you today about the different types of governments there are and the different types of economic systems. Every country can decide how to run their country differently. I'm going to show you the different ways that they can do that. Remember to have your notes available so that you can take extra notes on the side just to help you understand it better, and you can go back and reference this because sometimes I talk about things that aren't necessarily on the notes. All right. So there's a first type of government. One is called a democracy. Now, we don't actually have a democracy, and I'll explain that in a second. It's a system where the government is based on the will of the people. So do we have a government based on the will of us? Yeah, because we get to vote and choose who are our representatives. But in just a regular direct democracy, that's not necessarily the case. So we're going to kind of go over the differences between a direct democracy, which we don't have, and a representative or a republic. So a direct democracy is where the people vote on every issue, or just a regular democracy, or a pure democracy where everybody votes on every single thing. It's very inefficient. It's very improbable. Can you imagine? There's about 10,000 laws that go through Congress every year, and that's just Congress. We're not even talking about state and local laws and regulations. Can you imagine being asked to vote on every single one? First of all, it's practically impossible because it would take way too much time. Second of all, not every one of us is well informed enough to understand how to vote and what these complex rules and regulations mean. Maybe you want to be an engineer someday. That's great. And you're working on civil engineering, which is building buildings. But there's a law in the books that talks about that you have to vote on about healthcare. And it's very confusing and complex. We're not going to be experts on every single thing. So what we have is what's known as a representative democracy, or a republic. We elect people. We elect people to represent us and represent our interests. And guess what? If we don't like them, we get to fire them. That's where the democracy part comes in. We rule, and the way we fire them is not voting for them again, voting them out of office. We've got a big election coming up soon. So this is something that we can do not only just every 4 years, but you literally can vote every year. There's lots of different local and state elections that happen all the time. Now, another type of government people can have is a totalitarian dictatorship. Obviously, we don't have one of those. This is the idea of a single leader or a group of leaders that are glorified. The government seeks to control everything: economic life, social life, political life, all of it. And if you don't follow by the rules, it can be very bad news for you. We're not, I have Saddam Hussein on here. He was a totalitarian dictator of Iraq. Totalitarianism was very predominant in the 20th century. It claimed 100 million lives. We saw totalitarian dictators in Hitler of Germany, in Stalin of the USSR, in Pol Pot of Cambodia, in Mao Zedong of China, Franco of Spain, Mussolini of Italy. It was very common that people follow this, and it costs many people their lives. An autocracy is ruled by one. So think of auto meaning one. That's what it is. So a totalitarian dictatorship can be an autocracy, but so could a monarchy if it's ruled by one. That's all it is. It just means ruled by one. It doesn't necessarily. A czar could be an autocrat. It's just one person ruling over everything. So it could be good, it could be bad. An oligarchy is where a group of people holds power. If you've seen Star Wars and you've seen the Senate, that's an example of them ruling over, but that's not real. So let's think of a real one. South Africa during the late 20th century was ruled by oligarchs, and it was a small group of people. If you've heard of Nelson Mandela, he fought that. It was called apartheid, and a lot of people, but Nelson Mandela leading it, fought against having an oligarchy in South Africa, and they won, and he became president. Monarchy, you've probably heard of before. If there's a king, a queen, an emperor, a czar, that's a monarchy. You get the position based on inheritance. You inherit the position. England, or the United Kingdom has a monarchy right now, but they have a constitutional monarchy, so they really have no power. They like cut ribbons and kiss babies and stuff like that, throw dinners. Where like Saudi Arabia has what's known as an absolute monarchy, where like the king is the ruler. He makes the decisions. He has a lot of power. Next, we're going to look at the different types of economic systems that countries can have. I know this is a government class, but I'm telling you, economics and government go hand in hand. They're so interchangeable. We need to talk about that too. So, what is economics exactly? Everything in life is scarce. There's not a single thing out there that is unlimited. And don't say something like love, okay, whatever. I'm talking about stuff, whether it's actual goods like your phone or your clothes, or Doritos. I'm also talking about services like a haircut or an oil change or getting taught by a teacher who's obsessed with presidents. Those are all limited. You can't just go out and they will be unlimited and you can get them all time. You can't. So economics studies how those limited resources get divided. So one way of doing this, one system, and this is what we have, and it's been the most, it's as Winston Churchill calls it, the worst system except for all the others. So it's really the best, most successful system to provide innovation and get people out of poverty. It's not perfect, but it has been considered the one that has helped the most. And this is what we have in the United States. It's capitalism. Capitalism is a system where individuals and businesses control the economy. There's no government involvement. They stay out of it, and they let the citizens and businesses control the economy through what's known as competition and self-interest. So it's kind of an easy system to think about. You have your iPhone or a Samsung. Those are probably the two phones you have. And they're very good quality and they keep getting better and better and better. Why? Does the government tell them they have to? No, they're doing it because they're competing against each other to get your business. Do we buy things because we were like, oh, we just want to make people feel good about themselves. We want those businesses. We want Walmart to feel good. So that's why I'm going to buy from them. No, we don't. We buy things because they're either the best price or the best quality. It's in our self-interest to buy things. The government's not telling us to do this. We're not doing it for altruistic reasons. We're doing it because we are interested in it. And that's what drives the economy. That's what drives us to buy stuff. That's what drives things to be lower prices and good quality. Socialism is an economic system where the government controls all means of production and distributes it through democratic means. So socialism and communism economically are actually one and the same, where it's the government controls all means of production and they decide it. We actually have some aspects of that in our country, like for instance, Medicare, which is if you're 65 or older, you get health care from the government. That's an example of a system like that where the government controls it and they give it to the people. The differences with socialism and communism is that socialism allows for democracy, meaning like elections, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, right to privacy, that kind of stuff, where communism doesn't. Now, I'm going to skip ahead. I'm actually going to go to Big C communism real quick. Big C communism is the actual communism that happened. That's the economic system where the government makes all economic and political decisions. So you don't have the right to privacy. You don't have the right to freedom of speech. It's been tried. It has failed. It just doesn't work. When you take incentives away from people that would cause competition and self-interest, you start seeing poor quality products. You start seeing shortages because the government doesn't know how to produce certain things. And we saw a lot of people die with this. Like I said, they were part of that 100 million people in the 20th century dying because you've got Lenin and Stalin and Mao right here. Let me highlight this for you. Oh gosh. Sorry, I messed up again. All right, here we go. So you've got, Stalin. He was responsible for the death of 13 to 20 million people. Lenin, death of millions. Mao, death of 40 to 60 million people that starved to death under him. Stalin committed one of the worst cases of genocide in the 20th century called Holodomor. If you haven't heard about it, you should. He starved to death 90% of the Ukrainians. And you've got Fidel Castro, who was also responsible for the deaths of many people in his country too, because of their failed programs. But what is little c communism? So that big C communism is like what actually happened. Little c communism is an idea that just didn't get put into play. This was created by Karl Marx, who's the man in the picture. And what it's the idea is that the government doesn't control everything. The citizens, what he called the proletariat, which is like the little guy, the working class, they control everything. They own everything together and they divide it equally. It's a great idea in theory, but in practice, it's just nearly impossible because, again, because of human nature, people have competition and self-interest, and they're not necessarily going to divvy up everything equally. And knowing that they have to doesn't incentivize them to want to do the work. We actually saw this, if you guys remember from U.S. history, with a lot of the utopian societies during the Transcendentalist age, where you saw like the New Harmony and the Oneida communes in the United States. It was tried. It just didn't work very well because people, the 1960s as well, we saw this with the Summer of Love and Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco with the counterculture or the hippies. It's tried. It just doesn't work. So does every system have goods and bads? Yeah, absolutely. But it seems that capitalism has been the one that has worked the best. So that's it. This is what we have. If you have any questions for me, just shoot me a message. Otherwise, you guys can go ahead and do your homework, and I will see you later.